Hello dear listeners, welcome back to my channel. My name is Selena, I'm a clinical psychologist. After the last video on Nikocado Avocado's 2 steps ahead, I was asked to respond to this, so let's get right into it.
Hopefully you can trust me now.
I do.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I do.
Good. Whole Me Too movement.
Hashtag Me Too. Before I get started into sharing everything that's happened, I just want to read to you guys some definitions because I feel like I didn't know what was happening to me. So mental manipulation is when people seek to exploit things that are the foundation of relationships, such as trust, understanding, and mutual respect in order to benefit themselves in some way. And some very easy ways that you can spot manipulation in terms of emotionally and mentally is, for one, they use your words against you to make you do something you don't want to do.
This is an important point that she's mentioning, and this will often look like someone gives you the impression that you can trust them, and in a moment of vulnerability you will tell them something that is actually quite difficult for you. And when they want to use it in an argument, they will put it in a way where it shows a certain weakness that you have that they will use to their own advantage in the moment where it fits them.
2 is that they don't really care for how you're feeling. 3 is that they make you feel guilty or ashamed. I'm gonna leave some articles and videos in the description.
Shame is definitely a big component of manipulation. When someone feels ashamed, it can be so painful that that person would do everything to get rid of that emotion and just appease the other person. So it can be a huge driving factor in these situations.
I definitely had a guard up because I was like, oh, anytime we've talked before, he's just been asking nonstop about Veronica. And immediately when I met him, I could probably say that I was kind of taken aback by how comfortable he was. He just kept saying, like, yeah, that's online. You can trust me.
Hopefully you can trust me now.
I do.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I do.
Good.
To the point of her saying that she felt like Nikocado was quite confident from beginning on, I want to bring up the dynamic between someone who tends to be more insecure and someone who is quite sure of themselves. So because we have that dichotomy or personal differences, that already makes us more likely to perceive the other person's characteristics as more extreme. So for Stephanie in that case, she would probably feel like Nikocado is much more confident than he actually is because we compare them to our own baseline, which means that they will have a lot of power over them in that situation. We know that persons who just appear self-assured, they can allow themselves to do a lot of things that maybe otherwise wouldn't be possible just because they appear confident and as if they know what they're doing. I've actually recently seen a video, it was quite random. Someone wanted to get into a club and they didn't have a ticket or anything, but they were acting like they were staff from that club. And the security guy at the entrance just let him in right away because he appeared confident and because he appeared like he knew what he was doing. So that only shows that it can be quite powerful when the person in front of you appears like they are confident.
He even opened up to me first, which made me feel really good. I felt like, oh wow, he trusts me. And so I started opening up, and obviously the conversation did lead to Shutdown and Veronica. She was dyeing her hair pink at the time. And that pink hair almost killed me. And I was like, wow, that was annoying. And I'm sure she has things that she finds so annoying about me. I shared these little frustrations with him, and he had made me feel so comfortable. I ended up opening up about something. I was sexually assaulted in my own home. It was somebody that I had let into my home, and then they took away my power to say no, and it's kind of just shattered any sort of security that I felt at home prior. And then after that, I left with a very warm feeling of just, hey, he's nice.
I feel for Stephanie in this situation when she's recollecting how she has trusted Nikocado with something that has been quite terrible and traumatic for her. And that alone can exacerbate the feeling of betrayal that we might feel when someone misuses the trust that we have built with them. That means that because we make ourselves so vulnerable, the wounds can hurt more. That is something that we always unconsciously take into account when we make ourselves vulnerable. It means that we also open ourselves up for pain, which is also the reason why some people have a difficult time being vulnerable, because that means that it might make it more likely for them to be hurt in a relationship. So it's the safer route for them to just not expose themselves in that way and have this predictability and dynamics in a way. which also means that we can't really genuinely connect to someone, because by sharing adversity and by being vulnerable, that is a moment in which we can truly connect. So it really hurts me to see how someone might have misused that trust and that vulnerability, especially when someone endures something like this and it's quite difficult to open up about it anyways. Quite often it's not the best approach to just recall and talk about traumatic situations, because that puts us in an intellectual mindset, whereas traumatic memories are very much on a feeling level, on an emotional level. And to be able to process that, we need to engage our body, we need to move, we need to listen to music or do anything else that basically takes us out of that intellectual mindset that can really help us to process traumatic memories.
In October, he asked me, are you happy with your home? I low-key want that security system. And then he said, but yeah, I didn't know what level paranoid I was at, so I feel better knowing I'm not alone, LOL. Like, this moment, I really feel like cemented our friendship. He was telling me like, hey, you're not crazy. I thought I was crazy. We both feel the same way. It just really made me feel like we have this thing that we just can always talk to each other about. And he asked if I was interested in collabing. So I said, you know what, like, we've developed a friendship. I've met you, I feel safe with you. You make me feel like I can trust you. Of course, like, let's collab. I gave him the address and I felt comfortable knowing that I could trust him to enter this place where I very rarely let people in now.
What's probably worth mentioning here is the stark contrast between the amount of trust that she felt with Nikocado and the betrayal that she felt afterwards. It can put a person in a position where they both have a difficult time to let other people into their world, but also so desperately seek to feel more comfortable and open again. And what usually happens is that the person will rather withdraw. And this is probably also what happened with Stephanie in this situation.
I think there was like moments where, oh, that was a little weird, but nothing crazy. I just remember that before we filmed Nick's video, we were in the car and the topic of what we were going to talk about in the talking mukbang came up. And this is kind of when I first felt really uncomfortable, because Nick said it very assertively, we're going to talk about Veronica and we're going to spill all the tea. And I was kind of confused because I was like, oh, whoa, what? And so I was immediately like, no. And then he went, but why'd you tell me yesterday that you wanted to then? And it got really awkward after I said, oh no, like, I don't mind addressing shukbang, but that's it. And he just got silent. And I couldn't help but feel like he was really upset by that. And so I just remember, like, I was driving and I was like, this is so uncomfortable. Do I raise the music? Like, do I step on the pedal? What do I do?
This is actually an important moment, it seems like. It's the first moment in which we can really tell that her boundaries have been crossed. And here I think we can really see Stephanie's tendency towards appeasing someone who is abusing them or mistreating them. Because you can see that the way that she answers is not very assertive. She's not saying, no, I don't want to talk about this. She's basically walking around it a little bit saying, oh, maybe I can like bring it up a little bit. And another interesting moment here is the way that she felt about Nikokado's reaction when she said that, because clearly it was not what Nikocado wanted to hear. But did he really react in a way where he was that scary and intimidating? Or isn't there a little bit of an influence in Stephanie perceiving it quite extreme? And she might have a tendency towards a negative interpretation bias. Quite often when people have had relational trauma or they have been wounded in an interpersonal way, it can happen that when a person expresses a neutral attitude, that they will perceive it as a negative attitude. So it might be the case that she might have interpreted it to be more negative than it was, but nevertheless, it can also be the case that Nikocado was indeed very annoyed and very intimidating in that moment. And the contrast between how she acted in that moment versus how she's recalling that situation is also quite interesting, because now she's very involved and she seems quite upset and engage with what she's saying, whereas before it seems like she was trying to maintain the peace in that moment more than actually expressing how she felt.
But I still felt like, okay, at least we cleared it up before the video. We started filming the noodle mukbang. We were honestly having a really good time for like the first half. And then Nick brought up the conversation of shukbang. He did it in a way, I don't remember his exact wording, but it was in a...
What did you want to share? Or do you change your mind now? You said you wanted to talk to your viewers with me here, because you never talked to any of your viewers.
And I just remember feeling just shocked because the way he went about it was just so almost like an interrogation. But I was like, you know what? It's fine. It's fine. I'm gonna, joke it off. I'm gonna say my piece.
This could be the first clear example of gaslighting in their relationship. And I know that this term is used quite loosely, just so you know what it actually means. Gaslighting is a deliberate attempt to change someone's perception of reality. And what I see people do is that they will use gaslighting instead of lying or misremembering. And I'm guessing because the word sounds more sensational and spectacular. And we can't be 100% sure of Nikokado's intentions here, obviously. So we can't say for certain that he is gaslighting since we don't know his intentions. We don't know if this is a deliberate attempt to change her perception of reality. It might be the case, though, with personalities that might be more manipulative or less empathetic to engage in these strategies. Here we can see again that Stephanie has a tendency towards appeasing and towards peacekeeping. This might actually stem from her own childhood. Maybe she was brought up in a way where she needed to make sure that everyone is happy and calm. It might also be a mixture of her genetic disposition, maybe being more insecure or have more of a tendency towards anxiety. Because when anxiety is quite strong, it can be unbearable to see when someone else is unhappy. But what that also means, obviously, is that that person will put their own needs and wishes aside. And sometimes it can even lead to a person forgetting altogether how it feels to have needs. When a person has done this for so long and it has become their default strategy, they will adopt the other person's needs and wishes in order to be accepted and validated by them.
And every single time I tried to do that, increasingly, it seemed like he got more offended. He would look at me with such a shocked face. Like, I can't believe, but you said you wanted to talk about it and now you don't? Almost like, how dare you? You said you wanted to talk about it. And I just remember I kept trying to put it off. I kept trying to show him I'm uncomfortable. I kept trying to lighten the mood with jokes and give all of us an out of this conversation without ending it awkwardly.
Now, while we could argue that in a way a person has a responsibility to honestly say what they want and the ways in which they feel uncomfortable, it is also important to remember that sometimes the consequences of upsetting someone could be so detrimental that in that moment it's the more logical option to appease and calm the situation, especially for a person who's lower on empathy and wants their own wishes to be fulfilled above everything else. They can resort to behaviors that can be quite damaging after not getting what they want. It can be defamation, it can be insults, it can be triangulation, involving other people into their dynamic or talking behind their back. So there are real consequences sometimes to upsetting persons that have a tendency to act in that way. And I'm not saying that Nikocado is necessarily that, but the indicators that we are getting are that he might have a tendency to lean to that behavior as well, at least if the characteristics that we talked about apply to him. And it also seems like Stephanie is quite aware of her emotions, so it might be that in that moment that was the better strategy for her.
And then, instead of asking me any more questions, he started twisting my words. And he started saying things like, if only you guys knew what she told me. I would never tell you guys what happened because she shared it with me in private. She trusts me with these things. But if you only knew.
When you sat down with me.
And I remember this one part where I freaked out because he said, she is such a strong woman to me. As if I had endured something so horrendous by Veronica. And I almost was like, shoot, do I say like, oh, whoa, it's not that serious. Like, all I did was go pick up hair dye with her, you know?
It's interesting that Nikocado did that in that moment because it puts her in a really difficult position where on one hand she's afraid that Veronica or the viewers will feel like she described the situation to be so extreme or she put Veronica in a very bad light. And on the other hand, it can also very easily lead to someone defending themselves or correcting the situation, which would mean that she would actually talk about the situation although she didn't want it before. For another person in that situation, it might feel like, oh, Nikocado is on my side actually. Wow, this was actually quite difficult to endure. Maybe I should open up about it. Maybe I should show the world how difficult and hurtful it was, which would then go against their decision to talk about the situation.
And I remember picking up a baby wipe and being like, I know, like, my life is so hard being a mukbanger, and like really trying to show him that, hey, I'm trying to get out of this conversation. And increasingly he looked at me with more and more shock on his face, as if he was shocked and angry at the fact that I refused to talk about what I told him in private. But you told me yesterday you wanted to talk about it. Then why did you say you wanted to talk about it? I guess she changed her mind. Remember telling him, like, I was a little bit more cautious during her collabs on her channel, and he insinuated that, remember what you told me? This thing that she made you do where she put this, disgusting.
I wonder in this situation what Nicocado's intentions are. So obviously it seems like he wants to rile up the situation. Maybe he wants to produce content that gets a lot of attraction from viewers. Quite often we tend more towards dramatic things, and I'm sure that Nikocado knows a lot about that because he has produced content for a long time. And at the same time, he might also have a personal problem with, I think Veronica was their name, which would make it more likely for him to want to have other people on his side, so he feels more assured that his negative view of this person is valid. And it can also lead to someone who is in Stephanie's position to actually be afraid again of upsetting Nikocado or anything else that's in that situation, because you're firsthand seeing what can happen when he doesn't like you. And this can be really scary in that situation. If you feel like someone is actually trying to take you on their side and using a scapegoat in that situation, which would be Veronica, it can be alluring because you can feel like, oh, finally I have someone who understands we are this team, and I feel more secure and self-assured when this very confident person is sharing this opinion that I have. But that security can be quite temporary again, until that person feels wronged, or they maybe misinterpret something, or there's an actual falling out between the two of you. Then it is quite likely that the same thing would happen to you.
But I just remember saying, oh my god, you make it sound like I was abused. It felt like he was putting words into my mouth. One of the reasons that I didn't want to make this video and I felt like I was crazy is because I know everyone's just going to be saying, Stephanie, you're a grown woman. Why didn't you just leave? Or tell him, hey, stop. At that point, like, I don't even know if I can describe to you the feelings, because it's almost like any feeling that you had of this person at least has a mutual respect for me. It's just all gone. And he didn't care what I wanted to talk about. He didn't care how I felt. It went on for 30 minutes. I felt like anything I say, even Nick stop, he would use it and make an exposing video or threaten me with it. I don't know. I was just scared.
Yeah, this is a very real thing that she's describing, that other people who are maybe on the outside might say, why didn't you just say no? But for a person in that situation, especially with a past like hers, it can be really difficult to feel like you have the right to do that. And again, you can feel so intimidated and scared that it's just not possible for you to express yourself that way. What also seems to be happening here is that transference is taking place, because it almost appears like the way that she's behaving with Nikocado is the same way that she has behaved when she was sexually abused, in terms of that person taking her control, that person intimidating and scaring her so much that she can't express what she wants to express. It sounds like she's freezing in that moment, and this can very much be a sign of PTSD and an emotional flashback. An emotional flashback is not talked about a lot. What people usually think about when they think about flashback is an auditory or visual memory, a recall of the exact situation that happened when they endured the trauma. And an emotional flashback can be triggered when the same feeling is induced as in that situation where one was traumatized. So since she is feeling like the same is happening with Nikocado, it can very well be that she's actually experiencing this flashback on emotional level. Okay, so this is it for today's video. If you're interested in me reacting to the rest of Stephanie's video, then let me know and I will continue my reaction. If you have anything to say about Stephanie and the dynamic with Nikocado, I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say. And otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.